Join us on a journey where we unravel the latest trends, tackle your burning questions, and explore innovative strategies that are shaping the future of compensation, all with a cup of coffee in hand. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Comp and Coffee. I'm Ruth Thomas, Chief Compensation Strategist here at Payscale. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Payscale's 10th annual salary budget survey, which reveals planned pay increases for 2026. We see in the report that those planned increases are dipping slightly from 2025, and economic uncertainty is now replacing competition for talent as the top reason for those budget changes. This does create a challenging environment as we start to move into that year-end planning season and the budget setting season. And so this episode today is really to consider that and think about how we can think about making those numbers work for you. And I'm delighted today to be joined by two guests who can help me unpack the data both from the survey and in terms of providing solutions for you managing in a constrained budget environment. So I'm welcoming back to the podcast Amy Stewart. Welcome, Amy. Amy's our Principal of Research and Insights at Payscale. I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. And welcoming for the first time to the podcast, Kathryn Gombos, who is HR and Total Rewards Leader and founder of the Gombos Group. And I'm going to get you to tell your audience about that. So, Amy, do you want to reintroduce yourself to the audience first?
I would be delighted. Thank you so much, Ruth. Yes, I am Amy Stewart. I am the Principal of Research and Insights here at Payscale. I am also the one who creates or helps create our reports for Payscale. So the salary budget survey that we're going to talk about today, that is a report that I was involved in the production of. So I'm happy to be here and to provide some insights into what it says and some of the context economically around what it means.
Thank you. And Kathryn, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience for the first time?
Yes, happy to. Thanks for having me. I am Kathryn Gombos. I have been in the Total Rewards and HR.
Are you looking for a podcast that talks about humanity as well as human resources? Listen to the Reciprocity with AG podcast, where leaders in workforce and human resources talk more about themselves, how they reciprocate to others, and how they have received unbelievable advice for some of their mentors and people they've worked with.
Space for over a decade. Advising clients primarily, spent some time in-house as well. And about 3 years ago, I founded Gombos Group. And we're having fun solving pay and HR challenges at client organizations.
Great. So
thanks for having me.
Two different voices today to tackle this one topic, which is really the headline data that we're seeing around the direction of pay budgets as we think about going into 2026. So let's start there, Amy, with our survey headline. Do you want to tell us, first of all, about the salary budget survey and what were the key headlines we saw coming out of that?
Yeah, Payscale Salary Budget Survey is something that we are doing annually. We've been doing it for quite a long time. This year, we collected over 1,500 responses between May and June of 2025, and then we released the report at the end of July and in early August, depending on whether or not you are a participant in the survey. Those who did participate do get it early. So if you want it early next year, make sure you sign up to receive the Salary Budget Survey. The Salary Budget Survey is a lot of tables. It's a lot of data on pay increases that organizations both gave in 2025 and are planning in 2026. It also includes data on promotional increases and salary structure increases, as well as some questions around why the increases have gone up and down. And we divide that by many different segments. So we have segments by company size, by industry, by type of organization, by revenue. And you can download all that information and kind of read through it to see how your organization compares to other organizations in similar categories to help you do your salary budget planning for 2026.
And what were the key headlines then coming out of that report, Amy?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the really big headline is that salary increase budgets are going down. And I don't think that this is surprising for a number of reasons. We saw salary increase budgets go up following the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to that, they were pretty consistent year over year for a decade or more. We could, set your clock by the 3% average salary increase budget, which is above inflation to allow for merit considerations. And since then, it has just been this volatile, fluctuating thing where every year you have to assess what is going on in the labor market, what is going on economically, what your peers are doing when it comes to compensation management, and then make adjustments accordingly to try to attract and retain that talent that you need to maintain or grow in the coming year. This year is particularly interesting because we are seeing a really stagnant job market, which is, I think, going to impact pay increases and might impact them even beyond the survey data that we did in the spring. So we'll run another survey. Our compensation best practices survey will run in October, and that will ask the same questions to audiences so that we can get updated numbers at the beginning of the year. But in salary budget survey, the big news is that for the United States, it's gone down from 3.6% to 3.5%, and for Canada from 3.4% to 3.3%. The median is about the same. We took a median view of that as well, 3.5% for the United States and 3.5% also for Canada for 2026. So we're looking at numbers that are higher than they were before the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's because of stubbornly high inflation. But we are also seeing organizations struggle with the labor market, with hiring, with growth projections, which may impact salary budgets that organizations have to work with going into 2026.
So, Kathryn, hearing that data from the salary budget survey report, does that surprise you at all?
No, I think that, this is some of the headwinds that we've seen coming for some time here. And it's valuable to have, salary survey budget data like this to help guide us as we have to think through and make these decisions.
Yeah.
But not surprising at this time.
And I think what was interesting, or I agree with you, Amy, the trend, the downward trend wasn't a surprise, but it was that, I think it was like a 17% jump in the number of organizations said that it was concern around economic volatility that was the main reason why they were predicting that downward budget trend, rather than it being previously it's been focused around labor supply, Amy, hasn't it?
That is correct, yes. Particularly leading up to the 2019 pandemic, I think labor supply was the big thing that we year over year was, competition for talent, shrinking labor markets. How do you get the skilled talent that you need to compete in a growth-oriented market? And since COVID-19 has gone back and forth, during the Great Resignation, During the Great Resignation, we saw that there was a lot of volatility in the market. So you had a lot of competition for labor that was driving up those salary increases, as well as inflation, hitting a high of 9% in the United States in July of, I think, 2021. And then over time, that has come down with legislation, with the Fed trying to control inflation. They've done a decently good job at that, but it is still stubborn. So it's over the 2% that we want to see. And now we are seeing the impact to the job market, which we didn't see during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I don't know if you've seen the recent numbers. They were released just this morning.
I haven't looked at those.
But it looks like...
What were the updates? I haven't seen the new report.
22,000 jobs added in the month of August, which is dismal. And then they were revised June to be negative 13,000. So we are in a stagnant, deflating labor market, in addition to inflation going up, which is what economists were concerned about and is probably going to impact strategy for organizations going into 2026, unless we see some reverse.
Yeah. So we know it's the time of year when many comp practitioners and HR practitioners, Kathryn, are starting to think about that year-end preparation. They're probably looking at budget preparation. In this type of environment, how should they think about approaching that? What are the key things they should do?
I think the key is being really intentional, right? So when you have less money to work with and the economic conditions are uncertain, you have to be sharper about prioritization. I think the best way to be clear about what you're prioritizing is to anchor your decisions to first your company's strategic direction. So what are you trying to be? What are you trying to do? Where are you going? But then also conduct a market competitiveness assessment and an internal pay equity review. I think those two things together are very important. This is going to inform you on where to place your bets, which means aligning pay decisions to your biggest retention risks, and your critical roles, right? The people and the functions that are going to take you further towards your strategic goals. I think it also means communicating clearly with employees about the why, right? So the why behind those decisions, so people know the process is fair, and even if the increases aren't as high.
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation because we haven't always been transparent about, the why budgets are what they are. But in the age of pay transparency, do you think, Kathryn, there's a growing expectation that from employees that they will understand, like, okay, my pay increase is only going to be X% this year, whereas it was, 5% last year or whatever?
Yes, I do agree. I think that people can get on board with frank transparency and they will understand the why, as long as you're consistent in the application of your market and of the data and the decisions that you make. So if they feel and understand that we're in an economic climate where it is uncertain, there's some really great stories leaders can tell about why they're being conservative with their spend. Things like, we don't want to increase our total payroll spend, which may lead to layoffs because we value you as the employee. I think it's also okay to say as an organization, we've done a competitiveness assessment, we've done a pay equity study, and we are going to distribute funds to this department because there are some challenges there where this department is all set. And so there will be no increases for them. So I think just being very frank and clear with employees and empowering your frontline leaders and being clear at the senior leadership level about your why. Yeah. I think that transparency actually really helps move the needle, especially in culture context.
And another key problem in this situation, obviously, with a smaller budget is managing differentiation, because you're going to have key talent in the organization that you want to retain, but you've got a smaller budget to potentially pay those. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, I think that goes back to being really intentional about your market competitiveness and your pay equity study, and really anchoring that again back to what are your strategic goals. I think if you're able to explain to employees, here's what we're doing and why we need these jobs and these people, again, everybody can be bought on to that why and row the ship together.
Yeah. And I mean, you talked about it when you first started, like giving your explanation was actually the talent requirement is really has to be your starting point. Is like, what talent do you need? Which areas of the business do you anticipate are going to drive the outcomes that you are wanting as a business? And they have to be your key focus areas, really. So that's your starting point. Then, as you say, you do the market competitiveness study. Okay, what is it saying for those groups? And then that really starts to help you be much more discerning, as you say, and intentional in terms of how we're going to allocate those restricted budgets.
Absolutely.
The other interesting,
I think what I add there too is, apologize, but what I add there too is that, right, when we think about that, right, employees might worry that you're going to just buy or borrow talent, and that might mean that they don't have the opportunity to build on those skills or learn kind of the new areas. So I think it's a holistic thinking as well, where if you're unable to sort of spend money to buy or borrow the talent that you need, think about how you might build and develop the talent internally. And that can be a part of your story too, that again gets people on board with why there might be a lower increase, because you're focusing your efforts on developing them, as an example.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, things I've been talking to HR practitioners about as we kind of advise them going into this season is, although it may feel like it's a very slow labour market or it's a cooling labour market, you still need to really focus on retaining that key talent in your organization. They become so much more valuable for them because you end up probably with less people doing more work, and you really can't afford to lose those people that understand your business, who are going to have the most impact on your business. And so, that's a good argument if you're having that conversation with executive leaders around, this is an investment. We need to keep the talent in the workforce to move us forward as an organization. I don't think people always think about, they're seeing it like that merit budget as a big cost lump on their balance sheet, and they're worried about that allocation rather than seeing it as the investment that it should be.
That's right. Right. That difference between kind of the ROI and the VOI, right? That value is there.
Now, Amy, in the study, it's not all the same, obviously. We do see some sector differentiation, and it's probably as you would expect it based on what we kind of know is happening in the labour markets. So tech was down 0.5% from that overall 3.5% figure in the US. And then in terms of up was retail and telecommunications were the two. Those were the key, big differences, weren't they?
Well, so what we looked at, and there's a table for this if you want to look at the industry overall in the salary budget survey. So if you go to payscale.com, featured content, salary budget survey, you will see that there is a table listing all the industries that we did segmentation for. And to Ruth's point, technology was 4% in 2025, so above everyone else. And now it's 3.5%, which is with everyone else, but is a 0.5% dip from what it was last year. And, we've been seeing the technology industry going through layoffs, going through hiring freezes, going through other challenges as particularly because the interest rates are high, which makes it hard to invest in something like tech. So that has been having an impact on that industry. We see, something different, though, in healthcare and social assistance. So in healthcare and social assistance, they were down 3.3% last year, and now they're to 3.5%. So they went up 0.2%, 0.2% year over year. Now, healthcare is in an interesting situation because there is a shortage of skilled labor in the healthcare industry, but they are also facing really stiff budgetary challenges, and that is looking to accelerate with the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill Act, because it is going to impact Medicaid, which does fund a lot of our healthcare system, especially in rural areas. So if you're in that industry, very interested in hearing from you about what you're seeing. But what I'm hearing from, our customers and who we talk to is that is it's a place to struggle right now in terms of just there's not money to go around to do other things.
Yeah, and the telecoms one was interesting because you kind of what's going on there? Why is that, seeming to be slightly hot? But when you start to look into that, that's again skill shortages and an increasing convergence with skills in the tech market. So they're starting to compete against each other. And so, that's interesting to see that, they're suffering from skill shortages, and that's potentially why we're seeing a slightly higher increase rate in that industry as well.
Yep.
Okay, so Amy, how can leaders take what's in the salary budget survey and turn it into data-backed decisions for this year-end planning season?
That is a fascinating question. So I think most people who are downloading the salary budget survey are looking for what are the overall numbers for my location, what are the overall numbers for my industry, and maybe some other factors that kind of impact what the budget can be, like company size. And then you shouldn't use just this resource. There are other salary budget surveys that are out there that is good to compare to make sure that you're not taking just, one slice of truth as gospel, but comparing that to other things. And then I would also recommend, if you are a Payscale customer and you are using our tools, there are things that you can do within, for example, the peer networks, to get some additional insights into what is happening for your market and to make adjustments or make a strategy accordingly, to make sure that, again, that you're attracting and retaining talent that you want. You're accounting for inflation as much as you can with it, as far as that impacts your workforce, but also taking into account your budget constraints, your limits around that. I will say that we have seen a shift with some organizations exploring just doing straight across the board pay increases for all employees. Starbucks made some waves by publishing that they were going to do that this year. We're evaluating that, here at Payscale, is that a good strategy? When is it a good strategy? It does certainly simplify the administrative process related to merit increases, which has been a burden in recent years, but you lose the perception of a rewarding merit within your individual talent stream. So you have to consider, is this a year where maybe that makes sense? Are there other ways that you can reward merit outside of base pay increases, like variable pay, rewards, recognition, that type of thing? So some organizations are taking that tact. And I think it kind of depends on how large is your workforce, how burdensome is the process. Do you spend more time figuring out pay increases than those increases are actually worth? If that's the case, maybe that's something to consider.
Yeah. I mean, another tactic I've seen in this type of environment is where organizations choose to focus the merit budgets on employees down the pay scales. So, executives maybe will get less or zero base pay increase, but their reward will come through the variable pay programs that they're participating in. And they use this opportunity to focus on retaining, key individual contributor and kind of like junior mid-manager talent. Is that something you've seen happen, Kathryn, in any of the organizations you've worked with?
Yes, I've certainly seen those at organizations where the leaders are bought in on it's a we environment. And I think that is a really fantastic story for them to share, right? The budget dollars that end up going at the percent of their salary can have a lot of impact on that frontline support level roles. You can treat a lot more employees with that strategy.
So what quick win, Kathryn, would you say to comp teams that if they think about putting stuff into practice, what will make a difference for them in terms of planning for 2026?
Quick win. I mean, I think if you're, either bandwidth or capacity or capabilities, don't have that necessarily in-house, you might just look at benchmarking some of your critical jobs, sort of looking at a benchmark of jobs within your organization to see what's that level of competitiveness. And, it wouldn't force you to do an overhaul in your structures or, put aside a large market adjustment budget, but it will help you go into conversations with leaders, knowing where you're strong, knowing where you're lagging, and maybe help influence the decision on where you need to make targeted adjustments.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah. So I think even in a tightening pay environment, it's still possible to leverage your budgets. We've heard that kind of in the contributions from both Amy and Kathryn. And really what I think is important is avoiding what we know as the peanut butter approach. Unless you're doing that intentionally. You talked about the example of the across the board increases, Amy. But, with a minimal sized budget, you do need to think about being discerning about, who you are going to decide to award and who potentially you are going to give less to. And I think really the leaders that succeed here are going to be the ones that plan ahead and focus on linking kind of, as we've said, to merit budgets to overall talent strategy and communicating with clarity, as we've said, which is really important, and keeping their teams focused on the long game. Anything you'd like to add there? What do you think, Kathryn, what's the single most important action HR and Comp Pro should take now to set them up for success in 2026?
I would say if you don't have a job architecture in place, get started on that project, on that effort. I firmly believe it's the foundation for all people programs, but arguably business success as well. So I would say get started on that today. And if you don't have one, I wouldn't wait to kind of start influencing conversations on the budgets and being fair in performance management to truly identify who your top talent is, who your high potentials are, and making sure that is a consistent and fair way of evaluating your talent. So I would say those are probably two things that I would focus on from an HR professional perspective, is making sure you've got a strong job architecture in place, and then being clear about how you're managing performance because of how that ties into pay impacts.
Yeah. It's interesting, this focus on job architecture that we've kind of come back round again. I mean, for me, where I'm based in London, a lot of the focus is around compliance with the EU Pay Transparency Directive and the requirements of that directive, meaning that ability to prove comparable work or work of equal value. But the other side of that is employees have greater expectations about understanding career paths and pay progression. And that's where, that job architecture and creating those career ladders within families are really critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people come to work to do a job, and organizations create jobs to get goals achieved. So being very clear about what they mean for your organization, what the opportunities are, really, really do drive business success.
And Amy, any tip from you, your single most important action that you think they should be thinking about as they go into 2026?
I'm thinking of two, if I can. The first being to watch what happens in the labor market. So, if you do have access to an economist, or if you're able to read news postings or look at the BLS data, so long as we have available, make sure that you are tracking what's happening, because that can impact what your strategy is and also the pain that your employee base or your worker base is feeling. So that would be the step one. And then step two, to Kathryn's point, not job architecture specifically, but related to that, think about pay progression from the point of view of your employees. Like, what is it that they are really hoping and striving and working for? And are you providing a pathway to increase pay for the individuals that you have working for you that can take different forms? I think job architecture is a big part of that process from like the back end. But from the employee standpoint, they just want to know, how do I go from here to here? And you have to have an answer for that. Within your organization, you have to have good transparency around why you're giving the increases that you do, or when you do your reviews for promotions or movement along the pay band. I think those are things that really resonate with employees, especially in a.
Yeah, it's great. Considering the employee view, is really important. And I think employee expectations are raised so much in today's environment that we really do have to think like, what is going to have the most impact with them as well? And thinking about all the options you have across the total reward or the EVP platform in terms of what you can offer them. This is a really good time to lean into potentially other things that you have in your arsenal that you can use, when maybe increasing base pay is something that you have less authority over. So, well, thank you both very much, Amy and Kathryn, for joining me today. Great insights from both of you. I think today's conversation has proved that when budgets shift, your strategy really matters more than ever. If you follow our webinars at Payscale, I delivered a webinar recently on tips for preparing for compensation season. So if you go again to payscale.com under resources on our website, you'll find on-demand webinars. You'll be able to tap into that webinar. And we will link the full salary budget survey in the show notes and comments. And we'd love to hear from you about how you're adjusting your approach for 2026. You can email us at coffee@payscale.com. And we're always here for the questions. And if you have another topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming Comp and Coffee episode, or you would like to join me on another episode in the future, then please do get in touch. Again, it's coffee@payscale.com. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, Kathryn, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Much.